This small island is Iran's Achilles heel, a single point of failure that could bring the entire country down. And it's essentially just a giant bomb waiting to be blown up.
Welcome to Buried Origins. Today I'll explain how this island, Kharg Island, is Iran's greatest vulnerability. So let's get into it.
Kharg Island is this little island just 15 miles off Iran's coast, and the life force of the Iranian economy, oil, completely relies on it. A full 90% of Iran's crude oil exports flow through the island, and oil is everything to the Iranian economy and government. Those oil exports make up roughly half of all Iranian government revenue. The prolonged stoppage of those oil exports would be a strategic blow to the country, devastating its ability to afford a strong military and function as a modern country.
Okay, so why would a country allow itself to become so dependent on one critical point of failure? Well, it depends who you ask, but we can at least discuss the leading theories. Now, the first seems a bit unbelievable, but it'll make sense later. And that's because it's simply convenience.
The island is in the perfect place for an oil terminal, due to its deep water, ideal for large oil tankers, and its proximity to Iran's major oil fields. The facilities on Kharg are so large that they're able to handle almost all of Iran's oil exports, with 1.6 million barrels of oil passing through the island every day. There was just never a real need to expand capacity in Iran's other deepwater islands or along the coast.
But that's only part of the story, because over the years there have been those in Iran's government who wanted to expand the infrastructure, but they ran into two major obstacles. The first was political infighting, as the oil ministry over the years continually clashed with a very powerful part of Iran's military called the Revolutionary Guard.
That's because in the 2000s, the Revolutionary Guard essentially took control of Iran's oil infrastructure after winning an internal power struggle. The Guard didn't care much about using revenue from oil to fund further infrastructure development, and so they essentially just used oil revenue to fund themselves. Now, the second major obstacle faced by those wanting to expand infrastructure were sanctions that the US placed on Iran, which scared most of the world's major oil companies away from investing in infrastructure. This severely limited Iran's technical ability to build complex refineries and export terminals.
So, a mix of convenience and the difficulty brought on by political infighting and sanctions discouraged the expansion of infrastructure, but all of those things together don't get at the main reason why the Iranian government never prioritized expanding beyond Kharg Island. And that's because the Iranian government has always thought that their enemies wouldn't be ludicrous enough to attack the island.
That's because Iran is in a very strategic location, sitting at a potential choke point of the world economy, the Strait of Hormuz. A full 20% of the world's oil supply crosses through this strait every day, and Iran has threatened to close it down using military force several times over the years, and has boarded ships before to exert pressure on its enemies when they got too aggressive. The threat to shut down the strait is central to Iran's strategy. It's possibly its main leverage against its much more powerful enemies.
And it's why Iran has never thought anyone would attack Kharg Island, because they wouldn't be stupid enough to cripple the world economy by triggering a closure of the strait.
Stopping a fifth of the world's oil flow would likely cause an international crisis with severe repercussions, and Iran has always planned to blame the aggressor state for such a crisis. Of course, closing the strait is a double-edged sword, as Iran wouldn't be able to ship its own oil through it either. Iranian ships would certainly be seized by rival powers like the US once they got beyond Iran's waters.
So it's always been an everyone loses scenario, which is why Iran has never shut it down before, and why its adversaries, like the US, haven't been more aggressive towards it over the years.
But one of Iran's main enemies doesn't get any of its oil via the Strait of Hormuz: Israel. Now, the whole discussion of geopolitics around the US, Israel, and Iran is a longer story that I mostly get into in another video, which I'll link in the description. But the key thing to mention here is that Israel today is bolder and more aggressive than it's been in decades, and the possibility of it attacking Iran's oil infrastructure, in particular Kharg Island, is being talked about seriously. Now, that oil infrastructure was already on a list of potential targets for an Israeli attack on Iran that happened back in October of 2024. But apparently President Biden was able to convince Israel not to attack either Iranian oil or nuclear infrastructure. But these days, there's a much more pro-Israel president in the US, and so the main thing that has restrained Israel over the years, fear of hurting its critical relationship with DC, is less of a consideration.
The last thing to mention here is that there's one very good reason for Israel not to attack Kharg Island, and that's to keep the possibility of attacking it as leverage.
It can threaten to attack the island to exert pressure on Iran for years, deterring Iran from taking action against it far into the future, essentially keeping a card instead of playing it to reap the benefits of threatening to play it.
So, regardless if Kharg Island is attacked or not, its importance will continue to impact political decision-making in the region for years to come. Well, I hope you enjoyed that brief summary of a critical part of the story that often gets forgotten. If you did, please share and subscribe. See ya.